There are 4 people a person must learn to forgive if they truly want to move forward in life. Only 4. No more, no less. And while that idea may sound simple at first, the truth is that most people carry emotional weight from these 4 categories for years, sometimes their entire lives, without even realizing how deeply it shapes their decisions, relationships, confidence, and overall peace of mind. The past does not stay in the past when it is not properly released. Instead, it quietly follows people into their present, influencing how they think, how they react, and even how they see themselves. This is why forgiveness is not just a moral idea or a nice emotional gesture. It is a practical requirement for emotional freedom and personal growth. And to understand it properly, we must begin with the first and often most complicated group of people to forgive: one's parents. Forgiving one's parents is often the most sensitive and emotionally charged step, because parents are the first people a human being forms a bond with in life. They are the first source of love, protection, guidance, and identity. At the same time, they can also be the first source of disappointment, misunderstanding, neglect, or emotional pain. Many people grow up carrying silent wounds from childhood experiences they never fully processed. These wounds may come from harsh words spoken in anger, emotional absence, lack of attention, broken promises, or simply the absence of what was needed during critical developmental years. As children, people interpret these experiences in deeply personal ways, often concluding that they are not enough, not loved enough, or not worthy of care. Even as adults, these conclusions often remain hidden beneath the surface, influencing self-esteem and behavior without being fully recognized. Forgiving parents, however, does not mean pretending that everything was perfect or excusing harmful behavior. Instead, it means releasing the emotional grip that the past continues to have on the present. Many adults unknowingly continue to live as emotional extensions of their childhood environment, reacting to situations based on unresolved pain rather than current reality. For example, someone who grew up feeling unheard at home may struggle to speak confidently in professional environments, not because they lack ability, but because an old emotional memory still shapes their response. In this sense, forgiveness becomes a way of separating the present self from the limitations of the past. It is an internal decision to stop allowing yesterday's pain to dictate today's identity. A helpful step in this process is reflection through writing, where one expresses everything that was never said in childhood, not to blame, but to release. This act alone can begin to loosen emotional tension that has been carried for years. The second group of people to forgive consists of those who have caused direct emotional harm in adulthood: friends, partners, colleagues, or anyone whose actions created betrayal, rejection, or deep disappointment. Unlike childhood experiences, these wounds are often more conscious and recent, which makes them feel more personal and harder to ignore. Betrayal, in particular, creates a strong emotional imprint because it often comes from people who were trusted. When trust is broken, it does not just create sadness. It creates caution, fear, and sometimes even emotional withdrawal from future relationships. People begin to protect themselves by building invisible walls, assuming that similar pain will happen again. However, while this protective response may feel necessary, it can also limit emotional growth and meaningful connection. Forgiveness in this context does not mean accepting or approving what was done. It means choosing not to let the actions of others continue to influence one's emotional state or future decisions. Holding onto resentment is similar to carrying a burden that was never meant to be permanent. Over time, that burden affects how a person interacts with new opportunities and relationships. They may become overly guarded, suspicious, or distant, not because the present situation justifies it, but because the past has not been released. One practical way to begin this form of forgiveness is by identifying exactly what part of life is still being controlled by the memory of that person. Whether it is trust, confidence, or emotional openness, recognizing the influence is the first step toward regaining control. Once this awareness is achieved, the individual can consciously decide not to allow past experiences to dictate future possibilities. The third and often most difficult form of forgiveness is self-forgiveness. This is where many people remain emotionally stuck for long periods of their lives because, unlike external forgiveness, this one requires confronting personal regret, shame, and internal criticism. Everyone has moments in life they wish they could redo, decisions made out of ignorance, fear, immaturity, or emotional pressure. These may include staying in harmful situations for too long, trusting the wrong people, making impulsive choices, or failing to act when action was needed. Over time, these memories can turn into a constant internal voice of criticism that repeatedly reminds a person of what they did wrong. The problem with this internal criticism is that it does not lead to improvement. Instead, it leads to emotional stagnation. A person who continuously punishes themselves for past mistakes often becomes afraid of making new decisions, which limits growth and confidence. Self-forgiveness requires a shift in perspective, recognizing that past decisions were made with the level of understanding that existed at that time. No one makes perfect decisions with incomplete knowledge. People learn, grow, and evolve through experience. What seems obvious today was not always obvious in the past. Therefore, holding a past version of oneself to current standards creates an unfair emotional burden. A practical approach to self-forgiveness is to mentally revisit one's past self and speak to them with understanding rather than judgment. Instead of criticism, the focus shifts to guidance and compassion. This process helps to separate identity from past mistakes, allowing a person to see themselves as someone who has grown rather than someone who is defined by error. Self-forgiveness is not about forgetting what happened. It is about refusing to remain trapped in it. The fourth and final category of forgiveness is often the most overlooked, and yet one of the most important: forgiving the people one has hurt. While much attention is given to the pain received from others, people often ignore the pain they may have caused. At some point in life, everyone has acted in ways they regret, whether through words spoken in anger, decisions that affected others negatively, broken trust, or emotional neglect. These actions can leave behind lingering guilt that quietly affects self-worth and emotional stability. When guilt is not addressed, it can manifest in subtle ways such as self-sabotage, difficulty accepting happiness, or feeling undeserving of positive experiences. This happens because unresolved guilt creates an internal imbalance where a person feels they must somehow pay for past actions. However, carrying guilt indefinitely does not correct the past. It only prevents progress in the present. True forgiveness in this context involves acknowledgement, responsibility, and release. If possible, it may include an honest apology to those who were hurt, without excuses or justification. In cases where direct reconciliation is not possible, internal acknowledgement still plays a powerful role in emotional healing. The key is to accept responsibility, learn from the experience, and consciously choose not to repeat the same behavior moving forward. Ultimately, forgiveness in all four of these areas serves one central purpose: liberation from emotional captivity. The past cannot be changed, but its influence on the present can be reduced or completely removed. Many people mistakenly believe that forgiveness is about the other person, but in reality, it is about reclaiming personal freedom. Holding on to resentment, regret, or guilt may feel justified, but over time it becomes a silent weight that limits emotional clarity and personal progress. When a person chooses to forgive parents, others, themselves, and those they have hurt, they are not erasing history. They are simply refusing to allow history to control their future. In the end, the real transformation happens quietly. It is not always immediate or dramatic. It is often felt in small moments: a calmer reaction to old memories, a lighter emotional state, a clearer mind when making decisions, and a growing sense of peace where tension once existed. Forgiveness does not change what happened, but it changes who a person becomes because of what happened. And in that change lies the true path forward.